It would have been great if you go along with some kind of examples for each.
Yes, yes. As much as examples are there, I'm taking the examples which is yet to come. So, which is there, which will follow now. Okay. So, before I get into the example mode, it is just a general understanding of how this thing works. So, once we cross this, then definitely we will deal with the example. Okay. So let me take that example. I'll come back to this slide in a minute. So this is the example which is there in the EIP, which we all familiar with in the plan to ACE process. So in this particular process, there is a stage which we map the process. In this process, a stage called setting allowable budget during startup. What is nothing but a stage, and we identified that in that there is a potential failure mode. So whatever is the potential failure mode being allowed, some action which is going to trigger that failure of that function or a stage not to happen properly. That is a failure mode. So what are the potential effects of the failure? The next is the question is, what is the effect of the failure load to release orders, non-submission of ACE, no quantity control, no WVS allocation. All these are potential effects which are not desirable. These are not something which you really want to have. So then comes your severity ratings, because it is not something which helps the system, and it can bring the system decision to a complete halt. You give a severity rating of 10. And the potential causes or the mechanisms of failure are listed here, because lack of validation steps. Then there are some errors in programming logic. All this could lead to this failure, and occurrence was also given a 10 rating by the team. And current process controls, as far as today, is it there which will control it? Probably no. The answer was no. And so then the detection is considered as mediocre. No, it's a moderate value which we give, because neither too easy nor too difficult. So and risk priority number is multiplied, and we got a number of 500 for this. So the recommended action was access control should be checked, validation to check 20% limit. All this different recommended actions are in place in order for us to reduce the value of the risk priority number. So typically what is in our control is a failure. The severity will always remain the same. If you carefully observe, the severity of somebody getting hurt is always 10. So can anyone tell me what are the variables that we can control in order for us to control our risks? So we have severity, occurrence, and detection as 3 variables. And in order for us to control or bring down the RPN, the risk priority number, we need to bring down. We can't touch the severity, because severity of, as I said to you, the system crashing, somebody getting hurt, all those will come under the 10 category. So, what is your opinion? In terms of what are the other variables that we can play with to bring down the RPN, risk priority?
It was the remaining two. The occurrence and the early detection.
Yes. So that is very good. So the occurrence, if I can bring down the occurrence instead of 10, if I bring down the occurrence to 1, which is like, well, it is not going to be very frequent, and the detection is easy to detect, then my RPN is going to be a totally different number, right? So that is exactly what we mean by doing this exhaustive analysis. And as we, we will, as we get into these full process maps, it is very important to map the failure modes for those, at least for a part of the process where you think the failure is likely to happen. It could be a functional failure, or it could be a business failure, whatever be the kind of failure that we are looking at. We could assess those using these tools. But this is typically used in conjunction with a loss causation model, which talks about a little bit more onto the incident reporting and the dashboards and so on. So that is again from the safety side of it. It's very heavily used, and I will give you an overview of that in a minute. But this essentially is a summary of failure modes analysis. It is very sort of rigorously used across the industry to identify what is my risk factor, what are the different stages in my process, and each stage how much risk it is worth taking. If it is causing a lot of 10 severity ratings, then you need to look at this process with with the process experts or domain experts and understand whether it is safe from an overall safety perspective. It gives immense knowledge and insight into the to the implementation team. So this is something which is usually carried out alongside any improvements to understand that what sort of a risk abatement plan we have, whether some actions or current process controls are in place, whether it is worth it, or do we need to completely redesign this to make sure that it is fail safe. So this is something which we can look at as well. We can so all the tools that I am listing here doesn't mean that straight away we should use it. I will guide you as the workshop unfolds. We will look at each phase and what are the appropriate tools at those stages. We make sure that we implement them. So this is also it's also very important to understand that FMEA is not in isolation. It's not like if I sit and do one FMEA on my own, I will not be looking at different perspectives. It is a team exercise, and a team consisting of especially domain experts, people who have served in the field, experienced field failures, and for them, it is very important to give these ratings. Whenever we need to give an occurrence of 10 or severity of 10 or reduction, they will be able to give more insights into the values. And that is how this is carried out. So with that, we move on to the next topic, which is the loss causation model. So I'm sure we did some of these sessions for other ICs. I don't know whether you have been introduced to this topic before, but I'm sure you would have heard loss causation model before. So here, this is all about the accident or incident investigation analysis. And whenever there is a safety-related implementations that involve safety aspects to be considered, you will have to do this analysis thoroughly and understand. And of course, whatever the lack of control aspects, there are some 5 stages here, which is depicted in this generic flow of information here. And what we need to understand is whatever is shown here from a systemic standpoint is what we actually carry out in the FMEA also. But here the reporting is more important in terms of how do we carry this information in a timely manner and report it to the stakeholders so that the quick actions can unfold and make sure that further damages are not done and we'll be able to quickly take the situation under control. And that is exactly what the purpose of this model is. So here again, the approach is, everything revolves, for us, everything is on data collection. So the data is something which is of prime importance to us. And from now on, we will see that, without data, nothing exists really. I mean, none of this analysis, none of these interpretations or inferences will hold good. So collection of incident data is very important and classification. That is how the domain knowledge is built. So we know that from the past history of incidents, I can give a severity rating of a particular incident as 10 on 10 or a severity rating of 9 on 10. There are guides available. You can create your own guideline. I'll be very happy to guide you there as well. Once the incident is collected, then the classification, identification of loss and loss potential. So those are important. And in terms of the classification of the incident data, and of course this has to weave in very well with the root cause analysis, because root cause analysis would have already you would have identified that there are several issues with respect to the process and functional stages in the process, and identification of appropriate control, which is there again as a part of the FMEA chart as well, which you saw that. And of course, Last but not the least, here one of the points that we need to emphasize is the facilitating the shared learning through visual management, which is highly encouraged because incident reporting is on one side, but how these lessons are being used, how do we take advantage of shared learning and make sure that next time this incident does not happen, or it is the risks are handled in a different way, and that is something which we need to see. Some of the organizations where I've seen is they look at if the risk happens, if we allow the risk to happen, then what is the price that we pay in order for us to come out of it, and that is also looked at from a cost perspective and time of implementation perspective. With these three dimensions, it's a combined weighting of these three factors that is taken to address a particular risk, whether it is worth addressing or not. So again, the loss causation model summary is, it's again on the left side you see a lot of points, but their focus should be on the communication dashboard. So here, potential worst consequences. So when we looked at the FMEA chart, we saw that there are many failure modes, and with a high severity, something like 8, 9, and 10 out of 10 scale, which is considered to be extremely high. And if you allow these severe these consequences to happen, then you will have that fatal accidents or major incidents that happen. So this is a chart that will help us kind of track and monitor these differences, different types of risks or potential failures that we saw. And some of this will help us identify those mitigation plans. So what is your risk mitigation plan? How good it is? Then that is a separate discussion altogether. But that is something which will need to be as part and parcel of the game. So that is very important for you to sort of deal with it, especially when you are doing a new process, altogether new process where you don't have any experience in building a process like this before. Then we definitely, the first time we need to do a thorough analysis of that and then look at the downside. What things might, if things might go wrong, and then be able to reason out and be ready with the action plan. So again, the end of do phase. So this is again a PT&D example which we had earlier taken, and so then this is a continuation of that. So this is the do stage. So in that, when we presented the plan stage, we talked about delay in overall technical resolution for key items, and this is something which was taken as the main issue. And then the team came up with a target. The current position is 75 days from LOA, and the target was 30 days from L1. And then what is the expected benefits in terms of time? Who are all the internal stakeholders? Who are all the external stakeholders were clearly identified, and who is the process owner? What is the escalation level? And last and the most important is the action plan. So what set of actions will lead to reducing from 75 to 30? So that is very important here. And I think Jerome, are you there in the call? Jerome?
Yeah, Sriram, you can go ahead. I think he is not there, but any query I can address.
Yes. So the morning, when we presented the plan phase, there was a question from one of the participants that has this particular item been addressed? So in the larger interest of the group, if you could just summarize, that will be good.
Okay, no problem. So basically, I think one of the participants wanted to see the output. So I'll ask Jerome to project the output before we end today's session. Okay. On the second thing, I just, if you allow me 2 minutes, I'd just like to narrate what drove us to look at this initiative.
Yeah, please take that.
Yeah. So basically, I am relating to Dr. Sriram's root cause analysis, what he talked about that. And so how we started is, if you see to PT&D's context, most of our projects are not started on time. Basically, if we assume that our excavation at one of the substation sites would start in 2 months or 3 months, we end up starting the project in 6 months time. So this was my problem statement with which we started to drill down and see why this is happening. So then we went, then we understood that, okay, the drawings are not released. The good for construction's drawings are not released to site. That's why they are unable to start the excavation on time. Then why the good for construction drawings are not released? So again, you drill down, you find that, okay, my layouts got delayed. That's why he could not make this thing. Now, why the layouts got delayed? The layouts got delayed because I didn't have the vendor drawings. So then we analyze why the vendor drawings are not there. Then they say, okay, the purchase department has not released the order, so we don't have the vendor drawings. So we went to the purchase department to ask why you have not released the order, why it is delayed. No, the technical resolution is taking a lot of time. That's why I am unable to release the order. So this is how we drilled down and found that this overall technical resolution is taking a lot of time. It is taking as high as 75 days from the date of LOA, and there is no chance for me to start the project in 3 months. So I can always put a pressure on the site why you have not started the work. But if I don't streamline this particular process of getting this overall technical resolution done very quickly after award, I am not in a position to start the site work. So this is exactly I need to hit the root cause, not I should hit here and there and then finally I don't end up anything. So this is what I just wanted to tell to relate to what Dr. Sriram said earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So that summarizes the do part of it, and as I said to you, to end of the do phase.
Yeah, on this side, KRB. Yeah. Deepak Nayak, you rightly said, whatever the analysis you have made, over the period we learned also the main implication is the identification of the plan coordinates itself is difficult. So these are the points we also taken. Then we started implementing the day one itself. We want to finalize the coordinate of the station and progress on like that we planned. But we are able to progress on that. But in our African projects, many locations, what my observation is, the coordinates also getting changed during the execution phase. Whatever the tendering time, the coordinates are fixed. It will be after handing over, there may be a little bit changes due to the lines or due to the plot area itself. It is happening. This is the point we are taken up when we are starting the Tanzania project. We started with the coordinate fixing and other things the first priority. So it is given a good yield, but over the period, client has changed overall layout that has impacted differently.
Yeah,
this is a very specific reason.
See, absolutely. I mean, when we also brainstormed, we had a lot of issues which is client related, and certain client related issue are not controllable. Okay. Now, what we are deciding, many times what happens, there is a overlapping between the client related issue and our own issue. And many times when we try to defend ourselves, we say that, okay, there is a issue because of this, but the other side which I should have performed, I don't perform. So this exercise mainly focuses at removing the internal inefficiencies and bringing in efficiency elsewhere. Client issues will continue to be there and will be there. Okay. So which may not be controllable through this exercise what we are doing.
You are absolutely right. I am also in the same line. We are everyone in the same line, I feel.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So just to add to what the discussion sometime and Deepak's explanation and then follow-up discussions on that. One thing which is across the industry, what we have observed generally is the places where you involve external agencies like vendors, for example, of many sorts at the design stage, at implementation stage, whatever be the stage. The people or the projects have suffered a lot because of the variety and because of the sheer number, and sometimes even the quality of their output is very much questionable. And as a result of which the projects have suffered in many across the industries. So what generally in some industries follow the pattern is to these kind of workshops, they include the most trusted vendors, at least using this 80-20 rule, important ones at least participate in it and identify that in their part of the value chain, these inefficiencies don't happen. And that is one way of looking at it. But it is, of course, the internal call whether to include them or not. Of course, that is a business decision. But this is something which I had observed and I thought of I should share it here. So that is purely with the intention of making sure that as these vendors get involved more and more not just in one project, but they have had a series of such interactions with us. So in the organization, and they almost know the way in which the organizations work. So they will generally be able to adapt to the process flow or the process constraints or the process controls, which is defined by the parent organization or the master, which will give them the guideline as to what should be done, what should not be. And that sort of a distinction, if we can bring into the supplier people also, then that will be of use here. Okay. So with that, the do phase comes to an end. And by the end of do phase, we will have this sort of an action plan and clearly identified process owner. And we will then look at slowly into the the next stage, which is to take the process map and see what are the different types of risks that we are looking at, and what should be the ideal role of the process owner going forward, and how the larger implementation is going to happen. So in the check phase, this is really we will by this time we would have collected some new pilot data. Should have definitely we would have got some data to look at, and all this data should signify that there is a step improvement from where we started off. And so that is the whole purpose of this PDCA exercise, is to make sure that we make some step improvements from where we started, and as we go forward, is it something which is happening according to what we had planned, or is it something which is going in the opposite direction? Sometimes some change projects, when we initiate, we will have the plans, but then in between, we will not be in a position to sort of control it. Is primarily because some of the external factors would influence it so much and bring the entire thing to a standstill. And even that, we should be in a position to predict or at least forecast as a potential risk to the overall project. So that is a project FMEA at a project level, where we know the different stages in the project and what is the probability, or what is the occurrence, or what is the failure mode of those stages, is something which is also usually carried out. And that we can carry out before the end of act phase, the last one. But again, the process of carrying out those risk assessments remain the same. So in the check phase, there's a typo here. The check phase is an important phase. So that is something which will tell us in terms of the data comparison, how the different data sets compare between the before and after phases. And here the organizational change management. When we started this presentation, it revolves typically in all the change projects revolves on the focus on people, culture, technology, and process. And some of them, just because it's a soft skill, we cannot ignore it. And some of them can be measured in real time. Some of them are measured, but they are subjective measurements like high, medium, low, good, good, bad, not going well, not going well. Sort of ratings. These are all indicative of the process changes. And as we do this at different stages of the process, we need to understand something called as a resistance. And so resistance means that, when I'll give the best example I can give you is my own example. When I started off my career with another company, Caterpillar, it was an acquisition here from Hindustan Motors, where they have their earth-moving group here that was taken over by Caterpillar back in 2004 or something. So the culture which was there earlier and the culture of the Caterpillar as a company is totally different. And as a result of which, these sort of initiatives in the process excellence frameworks and the Six Sigma and Lean are something which they have never practiced when they were in the part of the earlier company. So when it was introduced, the people were worried, what sort of an implication it will have on themselves and the knowledge they already have. And, those kind of secondary questions start to come. And that actually manifests in the form of resistance as time goes, because it's simply, in many of the occasions, on many of the occasions, we found that they were simply not able to get through to the solution that we want is primarily because there were a lot of resistance to those old practices, change in old practices, and that is where the resistance happens. So the change implementation plan is a framework which will talk about a progressive nature of changes. If you are going to change the process in the way in which we work fundamentally, then we will not, all in a sudden come and say that, okay, tomorrow onwards, we'll all do this. There is a change implementation plan which talks about a series of changes that happens in phases in such a way that the process, the project team is able to accept those changes and then move forward with it. And that is something which is very, very important. Sometimes it is seen as a soft exercise in terms of, we're looking at this at a sort of a management jargon, but actually from an implementation perspective, people have really faced resistance to change, as a result of which many good projects got abandoned. But of course, we have seen success on many others as well. So if we do this change implementation at the right stage, understanding the stakeholders, their language, where there is a sort of their motivation as to be a proponent of change, or what it is, the reality. If you can carefully analyze and you do a clear change analysis, then this is a good way of moving forward with respect to managing the change.
Dr. Sriram, can I just interrupt you?
Yes, please.
I think TMD sir has already joined. Okay.
Okay.
So I think we'll just break for that, the address from TMD sir before we continue.
Sure, sir.
Okay. Welcome, sir. Sir, you are on mute.
Mute.
I put on my video, but I forgot to put on my mic. Right. Great. Good afternoon to all. I see around about 54 participants, all around 55 currently in the meeting. I think Rajan just entered it. So 50.
I've just opened my video, sir.
Okay,
I was
right.
there.
You are already there on call. Okay.
Hi, TMD.
Yeah. Hi, Rahul. You finished your address, Rahul? Hi, Sriram.
Yes,
how are you?
Hi. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
You finished your address, no? Okay.
Yeah, I did that in your absence in the morning.
Right. Okay. I think all of you have been listening to enough from management, enough from me, enough from others. I think yesterday's results, I think if you have been tracking L&T, yesterday we had our annual results out, and today was the analyst and question answer session. I was stuck in the middle of this. I wanted to hear what sort of questions are being asked and what is being directed to SNS and RSR and how they handle it. So what came across were on very simple things. They were looking at working capital management, how we are going to manage in this COVID situation, how are we going to manage our labor remobilization, how are we going to catch up the 2 months lost, and the most important is what will be the impact on L&T's revenue as well as profitability because of the COVID situation, and how do we look going forward the prospects, whether all the countries or all the regions or government entities will convert it or not. So you have a very difficult scenario in front of you. Now, when the situation becomes this bad, what is it that we do? We introspect. We look into ourselves to see that, okay, leaving the external environment on which you may not be able to influence much, and instead of reacting to the external environment, you have to start anticipating and start working on how do you mitigate the reaction. So that is what we have been doing so far in scenario planning, is that we were looking forward looking and trying to see what else can we do. Now, these are all one way of looking and one way of reacting to the situation. Now, I think this exercise on what Sriram has started, we started with the intent that I think when we start looking inward, we had also look on how do we, shall I say, target a job? How do we complete a job? How do we look at the process involved in the job? Are we just doing a hit and run, or are we going into it with a scientific bent of mind? Are we looking at it in a manner in which it can be broken down into components, look at each of those components and find out what is going wrong in it, or what is it that we can do better in it? I think when Sriram started this exercise, there was a lot of skepticism in the whole system. Let me be very open with you that this cannot bring results, and this is again one more exercise in futility, again one more set of this thing. But when we started doing this in substation, I think Deepak Naik and Sriram took that challenge. Mahajan ably agreed that yes, let us do the exercise in the substation BU, and I think it has given a lot of positivity in that whole lot. They could very clearly identify things which were what were the activities that they can start much ahead of time, what is the activity they can cut short, what is the activity they can do it in a specific manner. And I am finding the results. Means today when they get a job, at least they have put a process into place where there is a determined and a conscious effort going on by people to ensure that the job can be done well the first time. And the whole aim is not only to do the job well in time, but to anticipate, look at the issues, work out a strategy on how do we solve it. And the most important is how do we complete the job on time. I think we have I had written to my BU heads, when we analyzed out our 200 to 300 jobs, I could just get 4 jobs which were going well on time. Yeah, we will have enough excuse or reasons to say that the client has not given us clearance, ROW is not in my scope. To me, all these are issues which all of us know. So what have we done to prepare ourselves for it? What is it that we have, what shall I say, enabled to help the client to get these things done much faster? I think that is where the difference comes. When we do all these sort of process study, where we look at the issues, we start going in with a mental framework that yes, things are not going to be smooth. There are going to be many, many issues facing us. How do we prioritize which issue should be taken at the right time? That is the most important. We may know all the issues at different times, but which issue is to be taken at which time and how much time should we spend on it to sort it out at each level? How do we escalate it to a different level? See, many times when we escalate an issue, it is not because of your incompetency. It is because there could be an implication because of it, which has a ramification across the job, across the BU. So that is why you propose that I have thought of these solutions to it. Is not happening. So this exercise of what Sriram is doing has to be taken with a lot of seriousness. And especially now, why have we chosen Africa BU? If you have been tracking what is happening across the organization, you would have noticed that I think there is a lot of emphasis on our operations in Africa, because today domestic India is going through a very, very difficult times with COVID, and how will the funding go forward? The finance minister has told yesterday or day before yesterday that no ministry is allowed to do any extraordinary spending or project spending unless it is cleared by the government. So there are so many red signals coming ahead of us that we are worried. Similarly, Middle East is under a pressure of the oil going down, over and above with all the, already the locals are looking for much more benefits from the government, the oil coming down, the COVID issues, the expats, everything put together, it's a cauldron of, issues which can blow anytime. So you don't have a real stable situation ahead of us. So we had anticipated all such issues and diversified into Africa. Unless PTD Africa performs to its best ability, I don't think any other IC has the confidence of moving into that continent. Because we have been the flag bearers of, we have been the explorers who go in, look at the whole place, give them the confidence that, yes, you can follow us. We have mastered the art of tackling these issues. I think we have now reached that stage where people are looking upon us to prove that Africa is the real emerging continent, because this is where the real business will happen. So Once that is the case, it is necessary that each of the jobs we take is done to the best perfection, to the best possible time, in the best possible cost. You may take it at a very low margin, that is secondary. But the most important is, if we have planned an ACE, if we have planned a process to do the job, if we have planned to complete it in a given time, how do we ensure that that is met? I think the most important is, how do we plan, execute the plan to perfection and within the time. And please understand that your resources are no more unlimited. Resources are going to be limited. Resources are going to be scarce. And there is a huge cost-cutting pressure across the organization, because as an organization, we have lost 2 months of invoicing. If we have lost 2 months of invoicing, at a consolidated level, we are at 1 lakh crore company. Not at a consolidated, at a standalone we are a 1 lakh crore company. We have a cost of every month, at least not less than 1% of that. If you have to do a 10% cost in terms of salary and fixed overheads, we are spending around about. So that means we have lost already 2,000 crores of money in the 2 months of lockdown without any sales coming in practically. Hence, it is necessary that in the remaining 10 months, we do everything what we have committed to the perfection, and we don't overrun on it. We try to even accelerate. And now, if you want to accelerate, it doesn't happen by, what shall I say, by chance. Acceleration always happens when you plan. And this is the significance of what you're trying to do in this workshop. That you start anticipating, you start planning your process. Every process has a lot of, shall I say, flab. How do we remove those flab, or how do we ensure that it is not there and we do it to perfection? I think this is the whole purpose of this particular workshop. I think whatever Mr. Sriram is saying, it has to be taken with a lot of seriousness, and I would like to see that it is translated into action and there is a distinct results coming out of it. Because it is necessary that now the performance of Africa has to be at a very par level. It has to be of, it is no more saying that we also ran. It has to be the front runner who will guide for others, who will leave the path open for others to come in. So it is very necessary that you start now doing everything to perfection. So please get into the details which Sriram is telling, whichever task force or whatever is the process driven, it has to be really done. And I think, I don't know what is going to be the review mechanism. Please ensure that, but at least Sriram and DKN, I would like to get a feedback, or I would like to get into a review once in 3 weeks. So that myself and Rahul see that what is the action and where it is going forward. I would like to really see that. I think today is just the workshop. You will be having a workshop where you will find out where the things are going wrong, what are the issues, isn't it? From your substation experience already, you have a lot of benchmarking, you already have a lot of data available with you, and this whole process can be really accelerated. So these are my initial thoughts. For me, it is very important that this year Africa really performs full cylinder. It has a lot of, because most of the jobs are multilateral funding. It is necessary that we create an impression in that part of the world that L&T is the most, I will not say the most dangerous, but the most, shall I say, the most important player who has to be the benchmark for everybody. So if somebody is going to compete against us, and today you are able to see that every job that is being opened is with very severe competition. People are dropping prices like no people's business. Even in India, the costs are going down. So hence, if we have to work with a given sales price in a given market, the only way L&T can make money is by ensuring that your costs are controlled. Your costs are controlled when you do your processes in a very fixed and a rigid manner, without any leakages, without any overruns, without any, what shall I say, without any double mistakes or quality lapses or misplanning of a job. So hence, all these processes, what you're going through in this workshop is very important, because each one of you there, whichever the 45, 50 people are there in today's meeting, you have to ensure that you pass on these thought processes to the people working under you. And you control, I will not say control, but lead the people in such a way that we do the job to the as close as predicted, as close as planned by us. So this is the whole thought process for me. And I am very confident that under there's very capable leadership available there now with Rahul, Rajan Bansal, Sanjay Gupta, Rajput, all of you leading the places, and each country having a very senior person sitting there, you will be able to run the job well. So please get into the process, what is being done, take this workshop very seriously, and ensure that whatever learnings come get implemented in the thing. So this is my short and clear message. I am not looking at any long-term plan. To me, I don't want to go beyond my nose, because the next 1-2 months is very, very crucial. You will have to come out of the COVID issue, start accelerating. All of us are from nearly work from home, or what shall I say, in semi-lockdown condition. At some stage, this is going to open up. We will have to work, keeping all the conditions in safety conditions in mind. We will have to work. Otherwise, it is simple. If we do not work, the organization will feel the pain. And when organizations start feeling the pain, the actions that they take are very drastic. It has not much of a logic, because then it becomes survival of the organization. And when it is survival of the organization, if it has to cut off an arm to ensure that the body remains 100% intact, it will start happening. So we have to be very, very careful, because funds are scarce, people are scarce. Unless we show that we are performing to the best, the resources will never come to your end. So you have to keep that also in mind. And with this COVID situation, please understand people's travel, people's reluctance to move into a new country. There will be a lot of issues. So whatever resources we have to work to its best ability. And where work to a best ability, it requires solid planning, solid processes in place, solid doing the work in a very systematic and clear manner, approach every problem with, some action in our mind, anticipate issues. So I think you have a very, very challenging times ahead of us. Not only you, all of us have at every level a challenging time. And these sort of processes makes our mind clear on how do we tackle it, how do we go forward. Hence my request to all of you, please take this workshop very seriously. And I'm very confident that all of you will perform and will rise to the occasion. Thank you. Jarabu.
Thank you so much, TMD.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Sriram, anything else to say which I have missed? You can bring it out.
No, I think you are right on dot. I think it is a very good overview of the purpose of this workshop and taking to the actual business objectives of organization. As time goes by, how important to act in a process-centric way. I think very.
Right, all the best, and I'm sure this year you will bring the laurels to the IC. Already it has started coming in terms of some of the biggest orders we have taken in Africa, and I think slowly it is reaching a stage where in every press conference or in any analyst meet, Africa is being mentioned very clearly by SNS. So that shows that it is no more an insignificant thing, but the organization and the management expects that this will become a significant part of our operations.
Sure, sir.
So,
sir, one point, sir. The team PT&D. When I started this workshop with Deepak and team, and the flow of the information, the flow of the workshop, the commitment that the team PT&D has shown at that time, and that was something which was exceptionally good in terms of the participation, in terms of the different viewpoints and the way in which it flowed. And that I'm sure it will happen in this workshops also, and we should be able to see some good results. So
I'm very confident, and it will happen, because we have a set of people who are very, committed to all these things. I think that is the advantage of L&T to a great extent. Many of us are very committed to our work, and we don't see any issues in it. In a very light manner. Everything is important. So, right, I'm sure. And go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks once again, TMD.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
All the
you,
senior
Rajan.
Rajan, Rajput, Sanjay Gupta, see you. Take care. Deepak,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
sir.
sir. Thank you.
Right. I will drop off, and you may please continue. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
How's the session coming along so far, Dr. Sriram?
Yes, the session is very participative, and it is exchanging viewpoints both sides. And as we discuss, cover each concept, we pause for a moment and reflect on some of the issues that people have already experienced and they share their. And I don't let them to be quiet, and they don't let me, make it be a monologue. So it has been a very interactive session thus far.
Excellent.
And
Very good.
yes.
Very good. No, I think every little while, we do need to have sessions like this that help us kind of move away and realize the true perspective, because frequently we get stuck in our own operational mindset. It kind of doesn't allow us to think. One of the things that we studied in business is that you should have the ability, for example, to go back, just step back and take a balcony view of what is happening, which is super critical. And sometimes myself, my colleagues, all of us, we kind of get into the thick of things and miss out having a look at the bigger picture. So I'm sure they will all benefit by this session. Well, good luck to you and good luck to all of the attendees. Deepak, thank you once again. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Enjoy your session.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
So we are back now into the session where we stopped, and I think as the message from the top leadership, PTN leadership emphasizes the importance of process-centric approaches. As we work on these different projects, it is important for us to realize that how first and foremost is based on my collective experience of implementing this across various organizations. I can tell you that this is successful in organizations where there is some buy-in from all levels in terms of the senior most leadership all the way down, and at the same time we also need to make sure that we understand and these solutions are not implemented for a short period. In terms of what we try to when we say that we are correcting an issue, and that is something that the change should be sustainable. And that is something which I have emphasized time and again, and make sure that this sustainability is a primary issue for organizations that is not going very well as far as this change implementations or process excellence implementations are concerned. Some of the organizations have had difficulties with respect to the sustainability part, where the solutions are not seen in the longer perspective and longer way in which these things are usually done. And this is not something which we are doing for the sake of just one project and then be done with it. So that is something which is very important. And that is again re-emphasizing the purpose of effectiveness. So when we collectively put this in a kind of a rudimentary mathematical form, if you will, the effectiveness of this initiative is the product of the quality and the acceptance of the strategy. So if the acceptance is zero, then there is not going to be any effective implementation of this, simple as that. So that is something which we need to be careful about. And that is the reason why time and again, all the initiatives that is driven in a process-centric way will need to have that process ownership and the way in which the process will be executed. And there is no another way of executing it. And that is something which we need to be very careful about. So this is just an important aspect which I need to mention, when we discuss about change management in particular. So we are trying to move from current state to a desired state. The current state is measuring a design cycle time of 120 days, and we need to reduce the costs and the time, and hence we need to get it done in 90 days. And so, can anybody tell me what is the dip? That is expected dip that we're talking about here. There is a delta state in between. I have not explained to you what that is. I just want to brainstorm and see how many people are able to assess this. And so there is a delta state in between your present state, which is 120 days of design time. You want to reduce it to 90 days, and 90 days is what you want to get to. But then there is an expected dip, is what one sort of say one group of companies or one group of implementations based on their studies they claim that there will be an expected dip. So can anybody tell me what we are trying to convey here?
So this is Balaji. I expect the dip is due to the time taken by the staff to get adapted to the new change. The dip is due to the time or the skills needed for the team to adapt to the change that we are implementing and then give the desired results.
Okay. So that is good, but the reason why we see a dip in delta at times is that whenever there is a change is because people, when we talked about resistance, so there is a little bit of delay in terms of the organization catching up with that change and whatever is expected, and that is what is causing this dip to kind of be present in this visibly. You will be able to see that sometimes the organization goes through this change, there is a dip in between the current and the desired states. So that is because the acceptance in the organization, the training that needs to be imparted for as far as the change is concerned, all that will take time for people to understand and follow the process. Once they start to follow the process, you will see that that there is an improvement, and then we go to the desired state. So this is not something which has to happen this way, but this is an observation based on some studies by some consulting agencies where they want to report that be ready if in some changes where there is an expected dip, and then you move to the desired state. So that is the explanation for that. With that, we move to the last phase of the PDCA model, which is the ACT phase. So the ACT phase is where we kind of sum up the findings. I mean, we mapped the process starting from the plan phase, then we kind of did the root cause analysis, we found out the problem, then we tried to find for some of the root causes, we found the solutions, and then in the check phase, we did the failure modes, the risk assessments, and then the ACT is, of course, the final implementation plan of the PDCA, and all the stakeholder updates, your dashboard reporting. What is the dashboard reporting structure? The TMDs are mentioned about the reviews. So what the reviews should happen periodically, and these reviews should not be just in terms of the final outcome, but more in terms of the process and the process measures and how what is the health of the process in terms of and how sustainable that process is. That is how the dashboards will need to be reported, and that is how the reviews will be conducted. And of course, I will guide the teams as I work with them in terms of what when we need to have the plan phase with the leadership team, so that the progress in the project is number one. But then if there is as I mentioned earlier, if there is going to be a scope change, the change of scope is something which we need to be aware of. And normally, sometimes what happens is after the plan phase, there is a slight scope change that is introduced at this stage and so on. So that is something which we strongly encourage in the process excellence framework. Now, once towards the end of the ACT phase, there is something called as a rapid improvement workshops or kaizens. So what generally the teams find is that even at the end of ACT phase, not everything is fully implemented. There is always some little bit room for improvement workshops or RIW or kaizens, as you call it. And I'm sure you would have been exposed to Kaizen at some point in your career in L&T. But that is something which is aimed at setting the minor issues that you might have towards the end, that is to be ironed out, and so that everything works as a seamless process from beginning to end, and we are able to identify any future opportunities in terms of small improvement workshops, and that is something which is of paramount importance at this stage. And this is a standard set of procedures which we will be talking about the next in terms of a consolidated summary of all the PDCA, what are the key deliverables, and then how this continues. I mean, this will help in terms of combining this to form a collective tool set in order for you to solve the issues, either with the delay that you are experiencing, or with respect to cost reduction initiatives, we can look at that as well. This is something which is a typical report structure. When I mentioned about the control plan and monitoring, so that is this is not the format, but is a format which you can follow for your own respective project. But with the emphasis that what we are trying to show here is that you took some design tasks, and there are some procurement tasks that you'd like to look at the time. The previous time was 120 days. Present time is 30 days. So your cycle time savings is 90 days. Something like a sort of a brief summary of what the project is all about and what are the key savings that is resulting out of this at different stages. So this is a summary that, but I would not expect anybody to stick to this particular format. Don't worry about that. I think that is something which the team will need to design as per their and highlight as per their project and highlight the important parameters or important measures that needs to be highlighted. That will be indicative of the business impact. So that is important. So that comes as a control plan and monitoring plan, which is very important. And again, this is not something which can be ignored or which should be ignored. This is the stakeholder update. Again, we mentioned initially that we had the greens here and there were some red, and now we see that the purpose of revisiting this is to make sure that as we move towards the act phase, we see that most of the people who are initially strongly against were now become supporters. That is sort of shaded by green. So this typically happens in every project. There is going to be some resistance of some form. Maybe it is internal or external. We need to deal with it as we encounter it. But it will be a good idea to look at the project FMEA, especially from what Sir TMD Sir has mentioned, regarding the Africa projects in general. And I feel that the project level FMEA can be done, and we can discuss about it during the workshop. And I will guide you through that. And of course, once you have the stakeholder updates done, then most of the people have shifted their stand from being strongly against towards strongly supportive, which is the main aim here. And some still the band is there as moderately supportive. So we cannot, we can progressively change it, but not instantly. But at least the resistors will need to be taken to confidence, and by sort of showing them what is there in terms of the benefit of change, and that needs to be really understood in this entire implementation. That is what drives the success also. So before I go to the visual management, a very nicely designed process improvement project can fail if you don't have the stakeholder support, and that is something which would be reiterated. Even if you sort of come across this statement 100 times, it's still worth it, because a very nicely executed, very well done improvement project with lots of data analysis, with lots of good improvements, and if there is no sustainability and no stakeholder management properly done, then it's just a question of time before the entire effort goes waste. So please don't let that happen. And we will need to put in appropriate controls in making sure that this is not a one-time story. This is not a one-time show or just a workshop just for 3 or 4 hours. But this is for something that the organization will need to sustain. And as time goes, we need to show that improvement, demonstrate that by doing this in a process-centric way, we get the benefits. That is very important. And so that is in continuation with the visuals of change management. Here we are talking about some parameters which is there as a display. It's typically in Japanese industries, you see this as a Kaizen board, or sort of a, they call it with different names, but the essential summary is that the safety, quality, delivery, cost as the 4 variables that we saw at the beginning are kind of put with respect to what the state or the metric that they are being measured and tracked and so on. And last but not the least is a morale, and that is also measured in a subjective way. as the organization goes. So this is a visualization board that we can think of creating one in an electronic manner, maybe towards the end of this initiative for each one of those geographies. So I think, but the whole point is the entire team gets to understand not just the team that is participating in these workshops, but the larger team out there will need to understand the implications of doing it in this way. And unless and until that happens at the ground level, we cannot say that the organization is going to be working in a process-centric way. So that is the message here. So here again the steps of the PDCA summary. So when we talk about the PDCA, we saw that there are 4 stages: plan, do, check, and act cycle. And as we cross these 4 stages, here this particular slide is just captures the essential steps that is generally seen as essential steps in these 4 phases of PDCA. So as a plan phase, we typically look at start with the customer always. The customer, the voice of customer, the voice of business, you will keep hearing it, and voice of process. The process is showing some numbers, is throwing some numbers at you. That means it's the voice of the process, and that is something which we will discuss as the team discussion evolves. And voice of customer and voice of business, we already saw in some sense that is a client requirements. How do we convert that as business requirements and make sure that whatever work that we do internally is aligned to the outputs which is going to be received by the customer, and that is a point, and for which for the team that is going to be working on Monday and Tuesday, Alok has prepared a SIPOC. We discussed it, and that is nothing but a high-level process map. I'll explain you at that time what it means. So basically, we need to have that starting point. And we need to define clearly the problem statement. What is that problem we have at hand? And establishing the baseline, agreeing on the targets, whether it is a 3-month reduction in the window, in the 3-month reduction, the overall timeline or the cost, whatever it be, we need to be very clear there. And of course, the team formation, for which we have certain tools that I can suggest and help you go through that analysis. And once that is complete, then we will look at data collection, which is still a part of plan. We can look at data collection, process mapping, cycle time analysis, identifying wastes and identifying quick wins that I mentioned. So that summarizes the plan phase of the cycle. And once we have that, we look at the top issues identification, and based on root causes, we find the solutions and then put in a small pilot solution and a control plan in place, just to see whether the solution that you have developed is really practical and that is implementable. And then, of course, we go into the full implementation plan, where we identify the process owner, process FMEAs, risk abatement, and the final process map, and what should be the future value stream, so that we continue to save the time that we claim that by using a revised process that we will. So that is the whole point here. And to support us with all these analysis of data, identifying the root causes, doing the FMEA, there is, of course, a whole lot of templates and tools available, which we will share with the respective teams as the workshop unfolds. And the last phase is the ACT phase, where we have the paramount importance is on the stakeholder updates and making sure that the stakeholders have a buy-in to the change that is adopted, and the dashboard for communication visual management, which we saw. And last but not the least is, of course, by looking at the future improvement plans. It is something which we will visit all these phases, and after each phase, the idea is to have a review with your leadership. And there is a format. There's a very, very simple format in which we will arrange the discussion, and just to make sure that the stakeholders are updated properly, and we will get into that conclusion. So that is the that is a takeaway. So with that, steps in the PDCA summary, we go into the final last few slides, which is going to be on the benefits of revisiting the benefits of process excellence. So where all process excellence projects or process improvements we see in general the industry is improved overall customer satisfaction, increased productivity, then reduction of total defects and cycle time, making the processes more predictable and repeatable. That is something which is very important. Then improved process flow. The work is not getting stagnant in the somewhere in the flow, and that is exactly the purpose why we are doing value stream and process map separately. And of course, last but not the least is we have to show the ROI on all projects. We make sure that these projects have giving some benefits, which is, and of course these are aligned with the overall objectives that you have identified in this kind of projects. So with this, we come to the conclusion of the first part, and I will just a few more slides, and then I will be opening it for the Q&A. So the process excellence project, which is part 2, which is going to be happening on Monday and Tuesday, as we have set up the 2 separate sessions. We will identify a clearly, identify a burning issue, which is already identified for you. In terms of those project charters and what is the pain that the team is going through, and how that we can apply the tools of the concepts of lean, concepts from Six Sigma and change to actually model these scenarios. And this was prepared for HCIC, and sorry about that when being mentioned there, but it applies to you as well. And the project is with clearly defined goals and targets. So that is already there in the charter, and we will be going through the charter on Monday when we meet with the team. The charter is already ready for you, and the phase-wise execution with stakeholder reviews, we will talk about it in terms of what we will look at, what are the checkpoints for each phase, what is the checkpoint for plan phase, what are the deliverables for plan phase, what are the deliverables for do phase, and so on. And the teams, I will be mentoring the teams on the use of process excellence tools after this training, so that you get more hands-on in terms of the set of tools that we talked about today, and beyond that as well. And how do we quantify and report the improvement results, and that's something which we will discuss. And the format, I'm not really worried about the way in which this reporting is going to be done. We can look at various options. We have the idea is to get the message clear, so that what is the improvement from the baseline. That's the whole point. And then post-closure monitoring, and that is the part where we identify the process owner and give the make sure the responsibility is understood and the reporting is done. And the period of sustainability we can discuss and arrive at a reasonable period as much as the length of the project. So we need to make sure that happens. So this is the expectation from day 1, day 2 and 3. This is what we will cover also in terms of planning this. The project is not going to be complete in 1 day or 2 days. We will carry on some steps in the plan to get you started, and after that I will work with you closely, and we will have the online workshops just like the other PT&D workshops, and make sure that we bring it to a closure. So here is the project plan key milestones. When we prepare the review, stakeholder reviews also, you can keep this in mind. We should at some point in time identify an overall project plan with the key milestones as you would have already done, and then the process mapping, the FMEAs and the current process, root cause analysis, identification of solutions. So all these points that is listed here is what we will be going through in your workshops, but at the same time we will not, as I said, 2 days are not sufficient to solve everything. So we will identify some of those items that we can take, and then as time progresses, we will identify this and put a time plan together. So by the end of the 3rd day, that is Tuesday, the workshop, you should have a plan for completing this process improvement. So then we will work together in sessions and make sure that we get these reviews done and get the buy-in from the stakeholders, and then move on. So that is the thing. And then here again, we will be the ones that are items that is circled marked here are the ones we will be looking at more carefully than the others. So there are all the steps we may or may not need to follow, but at the same time, these are the essential or the kind of guideline steps that is given for the completion of this. But depending on the project that you have in hand, we need to look at the data, some aspects of process mapping, cycle time analysis, because these projects, I believe, the main issue that we are trying to address here is cycle time. So I've identified and highlighted it. That's all. That doesn't mean that others are not important. So, so with that, we come to the conclusion of this. We still have some time left. So what I would do now is to open up the session for Q&A. And so please feel free to ask any question that you have.
Dr. Sriram,
yes, Rajmut.
Which are all the projects we have considered now for the deep diving?
So there is a Tanzania project that Alok has shared a charter for that. So that is one project, and this project is about the design and procurement part of the process and reduction in overall cycle time of 3 to 4 months in design for upcoming projects in Tanzania. That is the focus here.
So it's only one project in entire business unit.
Well, the reduction.
So it has to continue. Just AKR, just to respond to that. So,
Yeah.
Because each geography will have its own challenges. The process maps may be a little different for each geography. So we'll have 3 separate segments. So we're just starting with Tanzania job. Okay. After that, we'll also take up the other 2 segments in similar lines.
Okay.
And once the concepts are done and you also practically see one project how Dr. Sriram is conducting, so then you can conduct for other jobs also. But at least 3 projects will be doing for Africa.
Right, Deepak. That gives the answer. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sriram.
Yes, sure. Any other questions from anyone, or any points that you would like to share?
Yeah, Dr. Sriram, one point, as we are having a very huge business across all the regions, not only in Africa, even in Middle East and even in Asia, the processes what we are having, as we in between we discussed 80% already we crossed the well, only 20% we need to adopt at least to reach some place. So rather than starting at zero, so why the processes which is been adopted well set in other regions and other countries, even though it is not applicable maybe other regions, but part of it will be more applicable. By seeing that, there can be a little bit more idea based on that, it can be further developed rather than having a total brainstorming. So whether that processes can be shared to across the throughout the PTN so that everybody can be aware, or so that it can be more simpler and it will be easy for everybody to have a brainstorming on that further improvement.
Sure. That the common aspects or whatever aspects that say for example the Tanzania project analysis, once we complete it, in whatever extent that we complete, we share on a periodic basis to the rest of the team, the benefit of the rest of the team. The only point where you need to make sure is that we need to take those points that are applicable to you, and then the remaining we'll have to contextualize with respect to your geography. That is the only thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm telling. So if those things, which is even not only Tanzania, okay, it is going to be an African project. What I'm trying to tell is if we have a previous experience, knowledge bank is there for the BU in back home in India, most of the problems may be similar problems which they would have faced, because being a foremost runner there, they are already done it, faced it. And now we are in the backside and we are going in the same path. So such things, if it has been shared, so if it is possible, that may give a lot of betterment.
Sure.
See, Singara will just to respond to you, the best practices of other region will be sharing. And to give you an example, when we started this substation exercise, the slab to slab time in a civil construction, or you can say from the slab casting to the access, the number of days which were being considered by the substation BU was much higher compared to what we considered in Middle East. So we use this Prapti data to extract it and to prove to them that this is something which is possible and which can be done, and then there was a buy-in. So each region may be following a different practice, but if we once we share the best practices, it may open up some new things and they may look at a new normal.
Exactly, Diken. This is what I am telling. So once
Yeah.
the people are fully knowledgeable on the backup things already been done, so that will be more guidance for everybody.
So during this workshop, you will come to know that certain things of like this will be taking up. I mean, when the team comes up with some duration, we may be challenging that why it is so when the somebody else is doing at that level, and we have a data to prove that.
Yeah, it's clear, Diken. That's okay. As long as this is getting shared, it will be a good opportunity.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, yes. Anybody else?
Mr. Shriram, Ramesh here.
Yes. Yes, Ramesh.
Just my request is, since you have already done the exercise for substation business unit, this question is to both Mr. D.K. Nayak and Mr. Shriram. If you can share those templates and share those findings with us, because we are doing the substation business here, essentially the same problems also are here, because the same set of people have moved from India and doing the jobs here. Probably we are continuing with the same issues. Maybe we can improve upon on that first phase. Then we can look for further more improvement in our processes.
Sure. Yeah, I will request Deepak.
Yeah, we'll do that. In fact, just to tell you, we also had an analysis of Africa reports from Prapti, and we had a brainstorming. In fact, a presentation to RSI and all the segment heads a few days back. So most of the points what was brought out were mostly covered in the substation BU here in India. Apart from that, there are some additional challenges like logistics and all which came up in Africa BU. So we have no issue. We can share those things and we'll do that. Okay, but only thing the duration specified for domestic may vary a little bit compared to what domestic they are doing. In Africa, there may be a different scenario.
That's
okay. Okay, but the issues are broadly common, apart from few issues which you are additionally facing, like logistics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So any other questions from any other participants? Well,
yeah,
go ahead.
Sriram, I think there was a query in the morning, so to see the output of substation.
Yes.
So maybe Jerome can just project before we conclude the session.
Yes. Jerome?
Okay. Yeah, sir. Just a moment.
Yes. You can. I will stop my presentation. You can start.
All right. Okay.
So for the participants, this is the workshop that was initiated with Deepak Naik as champion, and Jerome was coordinating the workshop with the rest of the PTND team here. So he's going to share some of the findings.
Jerome, you are on mute. Yeah, you can hear me now? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So what we did initially is that we identified the key issues which was predominant in substation BU. So that key issues, the 5 key issues were listed for brainstorming. So these are the issues. So one is a delay in overall technical resolution, delay in commercial finalization of key items, then delay in start of civil activities, and then delay in clean room access. Then what we did was we checked what is the current position where they are in their historical progress, and then we set a target for them. Then who are the stakeholders who are involved? Who are the internal stakeholders? Who are the external stakeholders? Then for this particular issue, who is the process owner?
Jerome, just to interrupt you. This 30 days from this target was set after a brainstorming, and the participant themselves came with this target. Okay, it was not something which was imposed on the group.
Yeah, exactly, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sir. So this is a process owner for this particular process activity, and then this is an escalation level. So in case if things don't go well, whom it should be escalated to. Then along with the team, it was brainstormed across engineering, procurement. Everyone came up with a list of things what can be done to make it better. So then, along with tendering team, what is that which APS can do? So he has given out. So what happened was the moment a job becomes L1, he will trigger it as an alert from CRM, and he'll let the business know. Then the information from EDRC. So there is a bunch of activities on how it can be done to achieve it better. So the total process time came to 30 days from L1, which was before 75 days from LOA, from the date the LOA was given from client. So similarly, I mean, everything first, the thing is it was discussed internally and then the activities are listed down with the responsibility for every particular activity, and then a process lead time was arrived. When can they give it? So this is that for every activity. I mean, if it is for the start of a civil activity, the finalization of agency was having an issue, so when they will do it. So there's a bunch of things which came across on how to resolve for this particular issue.
For example, they came with like my age is not there, so my survey got delayed because I could not mobilize the agent.
So there are certain calls which are taken at a country at a business level, some were taken at a cluster level. So those are the things. So once we finalize these dates in discussion with the team, then what we do is I'll just share it just a moment. So then the next thing is monitoring it. So what we do it is we put these dates in MS Planner. So everybody will come to know. So this is for a job XORA. So once this is implemented, they will get it from here. What is the plan date for every particular thing, and then the individual people updates the progress against this, whether it was done. So that way we monitor and track this exercise so that it doesn't stay just in an Excel sheet. So that is the thing. So DKM sir, if this has to be shared or this has to be discussed during the session, it can be done either way, sir.
No, see, we can share it for a better understanding. Okay, Africa may have a different duration, but then the principle remains the same. So you can share it. There is no issue.
Yeah. So the larger group will share the Excel sheet what was done for substation.
Yeah, sure.
That's it from that side of things.
So basically one major shift to each substation view was done and may be applicable to all the substation. If you start for a order finalization after getting the PO in hand, there is no way you can start the site work before 4 to 5 months, because first you will do a techno-commercial evaluation and then place the order. That will take some time, and there is some linkage with the ACE, so that giving the order for the vendor takes some more time, and after that the vendor shares the drawing which will be used for the layout preparation. So by the time you start your initial drawing itself, you are already 2 months into the project. So substation view has now agreed. As soon as they are L1, there is a trigger through CRM. Now Africa also implementing CRM. So the trigger can be given to the respective stakeholders like engineering head and the procurement head, where they can start this process of doing techno-commercial evaluation and commercial negotiation. Of course, the confidentiality based on the geography that need to be looked at. I'm not very sure how in Africa market it is possible or not possible. But I understand this some geography it will be definitely possible to look at these initial things before we start the real procurement after getting the order. So this is one major shift which substation has started, and by the time they get the order, now all the POs are almost placed. LOAs are placed, they have to only convert to PO. So there is no delay in part of EDRC to get a input from the vendor. And straight away the initial saving in number of days is 60 days. So that was the major saving which we achieved just by preponing the purchase order proceedings. Not to issue the real purchase order, but then whatever is need to be done, that can be done. Techno-commercial evaluation, negotiation, all those things.
Thank you, Dukan. Nicely shared the information. It's good for us. Definitely, it is going to help us in future.
Yeah, thank you. I think thank you for wholehearted participation of the group, and I am very sure will bring in some value to the Africa BU. Dr. Sriram, you have something else to say before we conclude? Hello, Dr. Sriram?
I think he's not in a seat.
Okay. I'll just, before we conclude, we'll just message him. So I think, Jerome, what you can do is you can, after Tanzania, what are the jobs to be taken up? That also we can check with all the segment heads and try to find out. And
Sure,
maybe we'll fix a time slot to ensure that all these things are completed by June.
Hello?
Yeah, Dr. Sriram. So we are just waiting for you to conclude. We already shown that dashboard and the other thing. Okay, so any concluding remark before we sign off today?
Deepak, I just, there was some connection issue. I was able to hear breaking conversation. So were you trying to reach me?
Yeah, I was trying to tell you any concluding remark from you before we sign up for today.
No, the only remark is that and as I said, this some summary, and if Jerome can share that presentation with the rest of the folks, that is on one side. The second thing is when we meet when they meet the individual teams, or we will start the session with the review of the full project charter and understand what needs to be done, and then we will plan the phases. That's about it.
Right then. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sriram. Thank you, DK.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.